years across 6 different countries, and I'm working now for Tailor in an advisory role, really helping the companies in particular within the Tailor network to really grow and scale. I've raised funding myself on a number of occasions, both within startup situations and also within larger organizations. So it's a pleasure to try and share some of the learning, some of the tips that I've had being in the same or similar situations as yourself. And of course, one of the main points of today's session is to prepare you for, I think for some of you at least, for your pitching sessions next week, and also for those of you that are coming to Brussels or will present in Brussels, I understand, on the 13th of December. So as Milena said, please be, please ask the questions you have, and let's make this a very interactive session as best we can in an online situation. I look younger in that in that picture. I need to change that one. But as I said, my focus and my background is more on the digital side, the tech side, from the last 25 years, particularly working in Swedish companies. That's been my focus. We have approximately 45 minutes for this presentation. And I see a rough split of half the time myself going through, the sort of tips and tricks that I've learned, and then hopefully, having quite a significant amount of time for your questions. So just very briefly, the power of Tailor, to introduce you to Tailor. Tailor has been in operation now for over 20 years, and is one of the largest platforms in Europe, bringing together tech entrepreneurs and strategic partners. And strategic partners can, of course, be investors, but also, very likely, they can be customers as well. So, of course, all of us have many stakeholders that we interact with. And really, Tailor has a fantastic platform to connect the entrepreneurs with such partners. And we also work as well with cities, with regions, and indeed universities as well. So, as I said, there's really a very broad cross-section of stakeholders, and this is from throughout Europe as well. And each year, over 750 companies are selected across approximately 25 events to present to an audience of venture capitalists, experts, and indeed, corporate investors and companies as well. Typically, this is done across 3 different tracks. So the event could be a specifically health tech focused one, it could be digital, or it could be more on a clean tech sustainability level. We also have regional events, for example, the Nordic Venture Forum, which, as the name suggests, really is bringing together the best promising companies from across the Nordic. So the whole purpose of today really is giving you the best chances, or at least some advice to help you succeed and have impact. And one thing that I always say to people is be authentic, be yourself. If you think about the collaborations you have with investors in particular, these are going to last for a number of years. So really make sure that you are interacting and choosing those investors which you feel could be successful for you on your journey. So think of it in terms of a marriage, or selecting a new boyfriend or girlfriend. You obviously, at least hopefully, go into those relationships with a long-term perspective, and you should do the same with investors. So you don't go in there in a sort of begging mode, thinking, oh, I'm going to take 2 million or 1 million from anybody I can get the money from. Really go in there confidently and think about, well, these are the ideal investors for me. And it's not just a question of money, it's really a question of fit. So which are the investors which would really fit me as I grow my business? You know, on a personal level, do I think I could really work with this venture capitalist? Does he or she come across as someone who's open to my thoughts, my needs? So really think of it in this way. So not just on the monetary side. Use as well the Tech Tour network. So, you know, Tech Tour has a very active LinkedIn group. It's of course embracing other channels of social media as well, such as Twitter, but really leverage this pan-European footprint it has to try and use the organization to help you make those connections. It's easy as well to focus, particularly in the early stage, on funding. But you know, don't forget the obvious thing, that you're going to be much more attractive to a venture capitalist or investor if you really have you know, a track record already in terms of those first customers, the first sort of impact in the market. So again, use the network to try and meet customers, not just investors as well. Just to, before I go into the you know, more specific detail of a presentation, again, just to give you a sort of screenshot here of some of the events that take place on an annual basis across Europe. So last week, for example, or a couple of weeks ago, I was in Munich for Tech Tour's Mobility Forum, which was a great event, connecting, you know, some amazing, for example, AI startups, hydrogen startups, to players such as BMW and others. So please go to the Tech Tour site on a regular basis and see whether there's an interesting event, hopefully near you or not too far away, where again you can connect with like-minded peers and make those first connections with investors. Again, think of the relationships with the investors a bit like if you were, you know, applying for a job. It is difficult to kind of get through the front door. Yes, you can send off your CV and a nice covering letter, but it's still very hard to stand out and get that email back asking you for an interview. And think about the same sort of scenario with the investors. How can you start building relationships with the investors? How can you start standing out with the investors, even at the very early stages of your journey? So yes, you might be way too early for an investor now, but building that relationship, perhaps in the early stages of 2020, you know, might put you in a very nice position later on in the year to really leverage those connections you've already had. So try and think, you know, way ahead of when you need the money in terms of building those relationships. And again, think about, you know, the homework you can do with some of these events. So again, as I said before, being authentic and thinking about the types of investors you want. You know, go through the calendar of events that Tech Tour has, for example, and try and identify where those investors are going to be, and try and go to the events and, you know, obviously go up to them, shake their hands, make an introduction, and already establish those relationships. Because as we all know, nothing beats a face-to-face interaction with an investor, or indeed any stakeholder, which is why Tech Tour tries to blend face-to-face events with the online ones as well, just so that we keep that face-to-face presence as well. As you can see here, before I actually sink into the sort of do's and don'ts, you can already see some of the names that Tech Tour works with here. So again, you know, leverage the network Tech Tour has and get these introductions made. So again, for example, on the health side, you can see some, you know, super interesting organizations here, you know, whether on a corporate investor or indeed on a VC level. So enough about the power of Tech Tour. Let's actually go in now and really see how we can make the most effective presentations to investors. Obviously, in terms of the maturity of your business, you will have different sort of focus areas, different valuation tracks. So of course, if you're going for Series A, B, or indeed C or D funding, you've already got a fair idea of how to make a presentation. I'm going to be focusing today more on the kind of the green area here, the sort of seed and Series A funding. So my apologies if some of the things I might say to you seem simplistic at times. So like in any presentation that we make, whether it's with a client, indeed with friends or in other contexts, it's really how you say it is really important. And if you think about when you're making a presentation to an investor, you might be unlucky in the sense of the timing of that pitch. So if you take one of the Tech Tour events, you might be unlucky and you'll be making a pitch, say, just before lunchtime or right at the end of the day when people are thinking about, going home and travel, etc. So you can imagine if you're making a presentation, say at 12:30, just before everyone's thinking about their lunch break, you might unfortunately not have the perfect sort of timing slot to present to them. So in other words, the way you communicate might have to be, that little bit different, that little bit more special to really make an impact and grab their attention, when maybe they've already heard 5, 6 presentations before you. So what can you do to stand out in those situations? You might have a piece of technology, a product, which you can actually hand around in the room just before or during the presentation you make. So, if you've got something tangible to demonstrate or to show, then of course that's going to help to stay in people's minds rather than just standing there reading slides off the projector. So again, if there is anything that you can do to stand out, the better. I was hosting or moderating a presentation pitch in Cologne a few weeks ago, and there was a guy who had a very interesting IoT, Internet of Things company involving data collected from space. And he made his presentation with a NASA jacket on. And it was amazing how many people really focused on, what a kind of cool jacket he had. And it was a clever trick because he already had portrayed, okay, yes, we are a young, dynamic company in the space industry. And he didn't have to say that, but he just had such a cool kind of NASA jacket on, which people could easily relate to. Another presentation I remember about a decade ago, it's the final of the European Venture Contest in Barcelona. There was an entrepreneur who had developed a fantastic new line of clothing, protective clothing for skiers and motorcyclists. And he basically introduced himself and then he very quickly fell on his knees, and it was a large wooden stage and he made a tremendous noise. But he instantly sort of demonstrated how strong his clothing was, because I think normally he'd have emerged with 2 broken kneecaps, but he sort of dusted himself down and said, yes, I have the best protective clothing in the world, or some similar slogan. So the key point here is, how you're saying it is really, really important. And as I said at the beginning, be authentic about how you're doing that. So, be yourself as much as you can. It's really important you do that. Don't pretend to be someone that you're not. So in terms of the pyramid of communication, like with any presentation, you need to grab the interest right at the beginning. So you'll see with the pyramid here, the different levels of depth of content. So the classic elevator pitch, this should really just be 1 to 2 minutes, really trying to sort of get you to the top of the pile, get you the attention that you deserve from the investors. spark that interest very quickly. Be clear in terms of who you are and why you're there. Again, I've listened to many presentations and people forget to give their name, which is amazing. Perhaps they're nervous, but more damagingly, they forget to really say why they're there. So you might stand up and you give your name, your title, and you really try and emphasize why you're there. So, you know, I am here because I'm looking for 2 million euros, and the 2 million euros is going to be to, you know, enter for example, the German and French markets, for example. So really, not only give a clear message why you're there. Again, it could be you're looking for strategic partnerships, or both, but also what you want the money for as well. So just in a couple of sentences, you've kind of set the scene to the audience. And then, of course, you go into a few more sentences emphasizing what you're doing and why your company in particular is really a great company to invest in. And then, of course, looking further down the pyramid, these are really dependent on whether you've really secured that interest. So let's say you've gone to a tech tour event, you've made a great pitch, you've been asked by one of the investors to send a business plan. You know, you're perhaps sending a teaser to them, and then, of course, the level of depth builds as the relationship grows. And as I said earlier, hopefully you've already got some of these relationships established, and you can leverage those as and when you need the funding. So in terms of the information iceberg, you know, all of us are on a daily basis overloaded with information, and the VCs in particular are receiving, you know, dozens, hundreds of summaries and emails on an annual basis. So in terms of the proportion of companies that they actually invest in, you know, this is very much a single digit percentage. So again, you need to grab their attention, focus on the key points when you're making a presentation, and indeed when you're communicating with them. So the actual content of the presentation, there's 12 points here, which you really need to certainly verbalize, but you know, have the backup slides there to help you, or at least to act as triggers when you're speaking. So as I just said, the kind of summary points, the introduction points are really, really key. So you go up and you make your presentation, you're confident, you clearly articulate why you're there, what your needs are. And then you go on to outline really, you know, what problem are you solving? Why is my organization, my company, my technology, you know, why have we got something great here? How can we stand out from the rest? One area that I've seen too many times that companies sort of skip through is, of course, the team. Without a great team, you know, what chance have you got to succeed and to execute the great vision and goals that you have? So really make sure that you've got a strong team presentation there, and that key bits of information. For example, if your CEO is on his or her, you know, 4th or 5th successful startup or company, then of course emphasize that. Emphasize as well the advisory board or the board that you've got, and indeed emphasize key relationships as well. So, you know, many of you have been selected for example, Horizon 2020 programs or similar. The fact that you've already jumped through that selection hoop already demonstrates that you know, some experts selected by the European Commission, for example, have already validated you to a certain extent. So the more validation that you can give, the more confidence you can give to the audience, the better. Just picking out some of the other things here, the business model is again something which is often, and I always think surprisingly, a kind of banana skin within a presentation. I've often seen the CEO will say, "Oh, that's a question for the CFO," and you think, well, yes, but you should be able to answer at least fairly in-depth questions in terms of, obviously, how do you make money? How are you going to commercialize this? Why are you choosing a certain business model? The second area as well that is often a can of worms for presenters is the go-to-market strategy. So how are you going to how are you going to commercialize this? How are you going to go to the market? Which markets are you going to select? Why have you based your company in France, for example, when your main market is in Germany? All of these questions you need to be able to answer in a very, very fluid way. And the classic thing as well is that, your grandmother, literally should be able to understand what you are saying. So the presentation itself should be very clear, it should be very simple, and then you should have the in-depth answers ready for those questions. Because of course, if you do not sound confident, that's automatically going to be a red flag with potential investors or partners. They don't know, they won't expect you to know everything, but again, you need to portray this openness that you have to learn. So by all means, when you're seeking your investor, you might say, well, my ideal investor is X, Y, Z, because not only would I love to have the financial support, but I would really love the guidance, the wisdom of that investor and his or her network. Because again, the investors will be looking at you as an individual and thinking, well, can I work with this team? Are they going to listen to my advice? And all of us have met entrepreneurs who seem to be fantastically bright and have super ideas, but quite often, at least, their ability to listen and to take advice is questionable. So again, if you can portray that not only are you very ambitious, but also you have the expertise and the ability to listen and take advice, then all of this collectively sends a very strong message to the audience. Of course, in terms of highlighting or differentiating you from your competitors, this is obviously a very key aspect of your presentation as well. Again, why us? Why are we so good compared to our competitors? I think the other things on the list here are fairly self-explanatory, and you don't need perhaps a slide for all of them, but you at least need to be able to articulate responses to potential questions in these areas. It obviously depends on how much time you have, and I understand for those of you coming to Brussels to make your presentations, you have 5 minutes to do this. So you could think, well, maybe 10 slides to capture the key things across 5 minutes. Obviously depends a little bit on the nature of your business, your products, your services. Of course, if you want to have some additional visual slides, then that's fair enough. But of course, you need to really respect the time frame you have to do this. But really, if you're going to focus on the key bits, of course, it's the vision and the goals, the business model, the sales, distribution model, and the competitors, and of course your need. Again, I mean, I'm probably, if you're kind of listening to my presentation here, maybe my presentation reflects some of this curve as well. But in terms of grabbing the interest level, be aware that, as I said, particularly at the beginning, if the investors have already listened to maybe 5 or 6 presentations before you, and they're dying to have a coffee break, a lunch break, or indeed it's the end of the day and they're thinking about their train or car journey, be really aware of the interest level. So really right at the beginning, when hopefully they're still fresh to listen to you, make sure those key messages are given at the ideal times. So I've highlighted, quite a few of these aspects already in terms of the pain, the value, and the validation you bring. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory there in terms of the elevator pitch. Again, if you think of the experts, the investors, they will be giving you feedback during your presentation. And again, if you're coming again, for example, to Brussels, and you have questions yourselves, think about the questions that you could ask them as well. So, in other words, when you go to these events, make the most of them. Make sure you've got your business cards with you. Make sure you're prepared to have as many one-to-one meetings as you can, and the questions you have, you can ask the investors and the other people there as well. I think just wrapping up before we go into some questions, hopefully from your side. Again, you can already see, looking at the 2020 calendar here, the breadth and depth of the events that Tech Tour already have planned, and indeed the geographical spread of those events. So you can see the different coloured sort of bullet points here. Many of the events are more for early stage, the red ones more for startup, emerging Series A stage, whereas the blue ones tend to focus on those companies which are already growing fast, looking at Series B. So I thank you very much for listening to me. Please feel free to send me an email at paul@techtour.com if you have any more specific questions, or if I can help you in any way. But I think, just aware of the time again, if we have any questions already, Milena, perhaps you could kindly share
Yes,
those.
we do, Paul. Yes, we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. We have a few questions, and please write them down if you have questions. This is to all the participants. The question and answer panel is at the bottom. You can see a small folder with the letter Q on it, and underneath Q&A, and you can write your questions there. Click on that folder, and you can ask questions there. You can write. So I have a few questions here from Andrei Lunev, and the first question is, can you suggest presentation strategy that would be helpful for the startups in AR or VR? The product is not easy to demonstrate from the stage.
Yeah, well, I think the the simple answer that you could have for that one is to basically, particularly if you've only got 5 minutes for the presentation, you could say to the people, very much similar to what you've just written to Melina, that you would love to demonstrate this, but unfortunately it's not the right sort of conditions to do that, but you would love to show it during the coffee break, after the presentation. So I think you can easily do this. So you can say, who I am. This is my piece of technology. I would love to demonstrate it to you during the coffee break when we have more time and a better sort of environment for doing that. So I think as long as you're clear about that, that's fine. And perhaps there's a way to show a screenshot or something before that as a kind of teaser to get people to join you during the coffee break.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And the next question again is from Andrei Lunev. How different would be strategy between pitching to business angels, VCs, or corporate VCs?
Well, of course, the angels are typically coming in at a lower amount, but you know, for all three of those different categories you've mentioned, they're all looking for you know, a strong story, particularly on the business side. How likely is it that they're going to make a return on the investment? I think the angels I know typically, you know, are quite keen to become advisors and to help you on that journey. So, you know, your investor pitch to the angels might be more embracing, in the sense that you know, you see them being nearly kind of co-founders or part of that initial team to help you grow the business, build the business. Whereas if you look at the corporate VCs, you know, they're going to be looking more at, okay, what are the synergies with my existing business? How can this complement you know, the activities I'm already doing? But broadly speaking, of course, all of those different actors will be looking at the, you know, the potential return on the investment. But I would say the more you go up the kind of food chain, if you like, the more kind of hands-off the investors will probably be. The corporate VCs, naturally, of course, they'll be interacting with you on a regular level. But I think from my experience at least, the angels will be more involved with you, and I think, as I said, acting as advisors and helping you to really grow that business.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And the next question is maybe similar to the previous one. Andrei Lunev asks, how different should be a strategy to approach for seed funding or Series A round?
Well, I think it's. I mean, my approach to that would be pretty similar, actually. I think the key thing is really portraying that you really have a strategy. You really know what you want to do and when. So you're really reassuring, whether it's a seed investor, whether it's a Series A investor, that you have a strong idea of what you need and when you need it. So that's the key thing. So you're not just saying, you know, I'm looking for 2 million, and then you kind of nearly put a full stop after that. It's like, well, I'm looking for 2 million, and this is exactly when I'm going to do it. And, you know, we feel that this 2 million will take us to midway through 2021, and then we're going to do this, this, and this. And this, you know, that kind of action plan, that roadmap really, of course, helps to reinsure, whether it's a very early stage investor or, of course, a latter stage one, that you're really on top of what you're doing. So I think to answer your question, at least in my experience, the approach is it's pretty similar, really. It's just more portraying that you really know what you're doing and when to do that.
Okay, thank you, Paul. The next question is from Andrei Lunev again. What should be a difference on the level of metrics key points to highlight in the pitch?
Sorry, I missed that, Milena.
Okay, what should be a difference on the level of metrics key points to highlight in the pitch?
I guess you mean the difference between your competitors when you're measuring the matrices. So yeah, I think the more that, you know, just often just on one slide, a simple table with you know, whether you've got the KPIs and internal KPIs, or the sort of differentiating points compared to your competitors. But I think again, in my experience, if you've got a simple table, 3 or 4 columns highlighting yourself vis-a-vis your competitors, and really emphasizing, you know, the differentiation with your product. Of course, your pricing may be different. You might have a different go-to-market model. I think just in one clear slide, you know, often I think a table works well. That can be, you know, all you need really, particularly if you've just got 5 minutes to do that.
Thank you, Paul. We have another question from Edgaras Glushnevas. I would encourage all the participants to type their questions in the panel in the bottom in that folder with the letter Q on it, because we will ask and answer questions for 2 or 3 more minutes. So I encourage you to ask your last questions. So the questions from Edgaras Glushnevas is, what form of startup update would you suggest for the purpose of maintaining relationships with future investors?
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I think, yes, you don't want to feel that you're kind of spamming your potential investors in the future. But I think, you know, for example, the tailor LinkedIn site is a very good way where you could share your news and know full well that you know, 500 plus investors, you know, whether VCs, corporate VCs, angels as well, could potentially be receiving your news. I think going to events where they are as well, you can share that information face to face. And I think as long as you're not doing it too often, I think, you know, just a short email and just saying, you know, further to the connection we had in November 2019, you know, I'm delighted to say that, you know, the first version of our product has now been launched. Something, you know, something short and sharp like that, I think is fine. And of course, I assume many of you are on Twitter as well. That can be another way to get your message across. And I think, again, with the investors, if you've got good relationships there, that, you know, those particular investors might not be able to help you themselves. You know, their fund might not be applicable for you. You might be in the wrong geography, you might be in the wrong sector, you might be the wrong size and type. But if you've got good relationships there, hopefully, you know, they will say to you, well, look, it's not interesting for us, but, you know, I know someone who could be interested in this. So build those relationships and just be aware that, you know, just common sense, really. You wouldn't, you know, don't message them too often, but just do things in a sort of polite, strategic way to keep their attention there.
Okay, Paul, thank you. I would like to ask again on behalf of Andrei Luna if he would like some clarification related to two related questions. And here they are. How different should be a strategy to approach for seed funding or Series A round? And what should be a difference on the level of metrics to highlight in the pitch?
Well, we've thanks, Milena. We've kind of touched upon this already, and I think, you know, perhaps I wasn't so clear before, but I think that the story, at least when I've raised seed funding before, my seed funding story, you know, whether to angels or to small funds, has been very similar to the story that I've told to larger organizations. So for me, it's really, you know, highlighting what you need, when you need it, and beyond just the financial needs, what you might need in addition. So again, that early seed round, who you've got involved with you there is absolutely key. So really selecting those partners could be critical in terms of gaining the attention to get a strong VC in an A round or a B round. So you might think slightly differently in terms of, well, okay, I'm going to select this angel, for example, because I know that she has a fantastic network in Germany with the VCs and with potential clients. So I'm going to really make sure that at this early stage, she is on board because she will help me for the next stage. So this kind of strategic thinking about, okay, who am I going to get on board at the beginning is really critical. But in terms of figures, returns on investment, valuations, this type of information is going to be asked and required from whether it's an early stage or a latter stage. So having these numbers on your fingertips and being able to explain why your valuation is X will be key to both actors.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. We don't have any more questions written, and I would like to thank everybody for their presence here, and especially Paul for his presentation. I thank you for your time, and see you next time. Please have a look at our website, tailor website, follow our events, and follow us on the social media. Thank you very much.
Best of luck, everybody. Thank you.